Hey there, Victoria here, and welcome to the Choose to Think podcast. I'm so glad that you're tuning in, and I know you're busy, but oh man, you're in for a treat today. I'd like to introduce you to a remarkable young man named Jordan T. Hall. First, hats off because he graduated from homeschool. Later, he went on to Georgetown College, and then he earned a law degree from the University of Louisville. And if that's not enough, he's written a book called Every Degree Debt Free that you're going to want to buy and give to all your friends who have kids in high school and college. I mean, come on, can you imagine cash flowing a law degree or any graduate degree for that matter? Yeah. Well, what's Jordan doing nowadays? He keeps his law license current and he's serving as a realtor for Century 21 in Frankfurt. He also puts his hands to work at Hall Brothers Home Improvement. Plus, we're blog buddies. A couple of times a month, he aims to share practical tips and tricks about wise money management and how to save money. And you can find all the links in the show notes. But needless to say, from experience and background, I think we can call him an expert money manager. In today's episode, Jordan shares his top 3 tips on exactly how to graduate from college with zero debt. These are practical applications that any college-bound individual is going to want to consider and put into play. But this episode is not just for prospective college students. Jordan and I also chat about the mindset of deciding, or we might call it resolve and determination. As believers, we also discuss the concepts of time, talent, and treasure, and how everything we do, everything we put our hands and minds to, we can do to the glory of God. And listen, Jordan shares a personal story toward the end of the show that will drop your jaw. It's about a huge wad of cash and a riding lawnmower. Yeah, so stay tuned. But first, an important ministry update. I am so excited to share a new adventure that I've been working on for quite a while. I just launched the Choose to Think merch and more biz, where you can purchase mainly t-shirts at this point, but I'm working on long sleeve shirts and hoodies to support what? Faith-based thinking. That's right. I've created t-shirt designs that help you feel empowered and serve as a reminder to choose your thoughts, emotions, attitudes, and mindsets wisely each day. Remember, our thoughts take up mental real estate. They're not just little particles floating around in the air. They're made up of chemicals, and they shape and form many dynamics in your brain, literally and physically. Scientists say that we think more than 60,000 thoughts every single day. And the Bible tells us to take our thoughts captive, to give thanks in everything, and to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Those are my podcast theme verses and the impetus behind my ministry. Enter apparel. Why not wear what we mean? I mean, what we mean says it all, right? Anyway, visit my site on Teespring where I'm loading new designs weekly. And tell me which one is your favorite. I can tell you that the t-shirt pin that generated over 8.6 thousand views on Pinterest is I Choose Hope Today. Perfect for this season, wouldn't you say? And, the messages are designed to promote conversation with folks around you. They're supposed to help you as you throw on the shirt, but also, maybe someone will ask you why you're choosing hope and what that means and how you apply hope in your life. These faith-based messages can serve as a catalyst for sharing your Christian beliefs. Who knows, right? Anyway, come on over and please let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your feedback. And guess what? I have a promo code for all my listeners to save $5 on your purchase. I think the lowest t-shirt price is $17.99. They range from $17.99 to $21.99. So that's a pretty good savings there. You can get the promo code in the show notes. Plus, I've designed 2 tees to reinforce the themes of today's show. One says, I choose productivity today. And the other says, I choose no debt today. So will you help me get the word out by liking and sharing today's episode or the link to one of the t-shirts on your social media? Or maybe you can send it to a friend in a text or an email. I would really appreciate this. Okay, now on with the show. Welcome, Jordan, to the Choose to Think podcast. I am so excited to have you here today. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I'm excited too. I'm glad you are grateful to be on. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're quite welcome, Jordan. Okay, so Jordan is the son of a dear friend of mine, and I've known Jordan, gosh, I have no idea. How long have I
20
known you?
plus years at least.
Yeah, something like that. So we're homeschool families, and Jordan in his life has gone on to he graduated from Georgetown College and then went to U of L and got a law degree, and he wrote a book called Every Degree Debt Free. And that's kind of where we're going to start at this point, because I invited Jordan to the show to share some of his tips and tricks about just how to do this in a day and age where college loans, student loans are just out of the park, right?
Yep.
Then what here's someone who's kind of on the other side of the fence saying, wait a minute, it doesn't have to be that way. So I'd like to just pick your brain a little bit, Jordan, on how did you come to write the book, and if you could share a little bit about the book and the process and all your mindsets and attitudes of actually graduating from college and law school debt free, which just sounds amazing to me. So and I know this is like a big, huge question, but anywhere you want to jump in, just go for it and we'll go from there.
Sure, sure. No, absolutely. Well, like you mentioned, I grew up. I was homeschooled, and while I was being homeschooled, I kind of you have the opportunity to really a lot of people do at least read really broadly and kind of focus in on the stuff you want to focus in on beyond just the traditional educational subjects. And I kind of, when I was really young, got into personal finance. My parents went through some rough financial times when I was a young teen, and as a part of that, I kind of watched what they went through, and they were doing some personal research, trying to figure out money and deal with debt and that sort of thing. So I first picked up a book by Dave Ramsey, which was back then Financial Peace. And I read that when I was like 13, and that kind of fostered an interest. And I went through his class with my parents, and he kind of started shaping how I view money and debt. And he obviously since then has become a huge household name in America. And so that was what kind of sparked my interest. And I would read as much as I could in high school about money. And I'm a believer, so I was always approaching it from a Christian perspective. And so I knew that I wanted to go to college after high school, but I knew I did not want to borrow money for it. And so I applied to several different schools. I ended up getting accepted to Georgetown, and got a pretty good amount of scholarship there. Enough that I still had to come out of pocket some, but it was basically just enough that I could work, and I thought I could work and pay for the balance of it that wasn't covered with scholarships and financial aid. So that's what I did. In high school I had started a lawn care business helped my older brothers who were already in the lawn care business, and I kind of helped them grow that. And that's how I paid for things when I was in high school. But I knew I would need that in college, so I continued to grow it in college. And Georgetown, I live here in Frankfurt, and that's only about 30 minutes from Georgetown. So it allowed me to keep my business here in Frankfurt. And in college at Georgetown, I would oftentimes schedule my classes as early in the day as possible, so that go to class in the morning, and the afternoons drive back to Frankfurt and work. And so that ended up being how I paid for my undergrad, the majority of it anyway. And I was able to do that and get through debt free. And as I got through my senior year at Georgetown, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do next. I wasn't sure exactly, kind of like a lot of college students. And I ended up, I had always had an interest in law and thought I might want to go to law school. So I applied to several law schools: UK, U of L, Northern Kentucky. And I might want to do that, but I knew if I did that, I wanted to do it debt free as well. Like if I couldn't pay for it out of pocket, it wasn't going to be an option for me. And anyway, I ended up getting some scholarship offers. Look, the best combination of the deal that I thought I had was at U of L. I actually got a full ride tuition wise at Northern Kentucky, which was pretty awesome. But I still had to pay. I would still have to pay for my living expenses and all that. And law school is, kind of like med school or other graduate programs, a little more rigorous than undergrad. So I knew I wouldn't be able to work as much in law school. So even though I had the full ride offer at Northern, I looked at my other options, UK and U of L, where I did not get a full ride, but I got some help there, but both of those places. But I knew if I went to one of those schools, which are a little more local for me, I could continue working some in my lawn care business. So I ended up deciding the best deal I got was at U of L. Had several $1,000s a year I would have to pay for out of pocket to cover school, and then I had to cover my living expenses as well. But I ended up deciding to go to U of L because I felt like I could come back to Frankfurt. It's about 50-minute drive from Frankfurt to that law school. And I knew I could commute back and forth and keep doing that. So that's what I did. I would oftentimes go to my classes once again, schedule them as early in the day as possible, and then drive back to Frankfurt and leave law school and go into lawn care for the rest of the day. And so that's what I did for my law school career. Actually, in my second year of law school, I discovered through some of my law classes a love for real estate law. And as a part of that, I always wanted to get my real estate license. So I did that and ended up starting to sell houses with my real estate license in law school. That helped me learn more about real estate and about the law, and was a great source of income to help pay for law school. Also got married during my second year, between my first and second years of law school, and to my wife Megan, who I'm still married to now, and we have two children. Anyway, I ended up using that combination of sources to finish paying for law school. And when I got out, I actually had gotten so far into real estate sales and loved it so much that that's actually what I still do today. I keep my law license active, but I have a passion for everything that has to do with the residential real estate market. I actually also started doing some remodeling on the side, and after I got out of law school, I kind of closed down my lawn care business because that wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. It was kind of a means to an end. But I kept selling real estate, and I kept doing some remodels on the side. And so now today, I actually don't practice law, at least not much. I keep my law license active, but the main thing I do is I sell real estate, and we do have a couple of guys who work with me. We do remodel projects, and then I also do some blogging and stuff as well, because while I was I guess to connect it all, while I was in law school, that's when that was back I graduated law school in 2015, and just before that, kind of between 2010 and 2015 is when student debt in America just started skyrocketing, and it kind of there started this narrative, national narrative of kind of it's impossible to go to college or graduate school without debt. I mean, students started coming out with hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans, and my goal had always been to avoid student loans, and I was doing it. So I kind of felt obligated to start sharing with other people how this can be done. And so it was actually during my first year of law school that I kind of got the idea. I said, if I can do this without debt, when I get done, I'm gonna kind of journal and write down my story and share some tips on how I think students can get through law school, or get through graduate school and college debt free. And so that's what I ended up doing in 2018. I published my book, Every Degree Debt Free, through Amazon, and it kind of tells my story of how I went through college, and mostly it focuses on my law school my time in law school as far as the story goes. But then it highlights some other people who have done everything from undergraduate, medical school, business school, debt free, and explains how to do that, how I did it, how others did it, how I believe anybody can do it, and most importantly, explains why I think that's so important.
I want to go back a little bit, Jordan, to what I think, and this may just be me, but is some kind of negative stereotyping about working so much. It's like, okay, you're a workaholic, or gosh, I wish you didn't have to work so much. And for me, what I've tried to do is spin that kind of mindset or attitude into something slightly different. Yes, of course, we need to rest and relax, and we need to have fun, and we need to fill our tanks and all of that. But why is it so wrong just to be productive? And why is it, quote, wrong to work so much when really it can be we can be doing something we're passionate about. We can be, expressing ourselves, using our gifts that God has given us, and work doesn't have to be something that is negative. Instead, it can be, look, I'm being productive. And I've tried to spin that a little bit. Matter of fact, I in an interview with a gal. Matter of fact, she had a law degree also. Her name is Elizabeth Jones, and she started a cookie business. And she said, we don't look at this as work, like, oh, here comes another cookie order and I've got to get busy working.
Right.
And the kids were like moaning and groaning because, oh no, no, we celebrated that, and we looked at it as being productive. And I thought that was such an awesome way to spin that mindset. But when I listened to you share about the hustling that you did, how did you manage that in terms of allowing that to be okay? Maybe your peers were over here playing, games or doing other things, which I'm not saying that all that is bad, but how did you handle that kind of amount of work emotionally? How did you really deal with that? Was it your frame of mind, or were you more matter of fact about it, saying, this is just what I need to do because I'm determined to meet this goal and graduate debt free? Were there any bumps in the road for you in all of that? Does this make sense?
No, absolutely. It's a great question, and I've actually thought about that sort of philosophy of work and how much one should work, particularly a believer, a lot lately. I would say what during my time in college and law school, I wouldn't necessarily call myself a workaholic because I was very much working at that time for a goal. I knew my goal was to get through school and to pay for it. That was very important to me, and I was working. I would say if I had kept up that level, that amount of time, and that level of work for an extended period of time, I would say it could become problematic. But at that time, I had a set goal. I knew what I wanted to accomplish, and also at that time, for the majority of it, I was single, and then I did get married, and we didn't have any kids yet, so I could afford to work at that level, and it wasn't as costly in terms of a opportunity cost. Whereas now, I'm 30 years old now. I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and to think about working at the level that I was working then is, would just be devastating to have to spend the time away from my family. And fortunately, now I'm in a position where I don't have to. I try to stay now at about 40 hours a week. It's usually more than that, but I try to keep my weekends available for my family, as many of my evenings as possible. And I think in the long term, a reasonable level amount of time of work. I don't think anybody should shoot to work 80 hours a week for 40 years. I think that's probably unhealthy. But there's the other side of it that says, a lot of the stuff that I do these days doesn't feel like work because I like doing it. And it's, as a believer, I think humans are made to work. Like I don't think anyone should strive for a life where you don't work. Almost even the idea of retirement from any kind of productive labor, I think, is unhealthy. Somebody might choose to or shoot for retirement from a career so that they can then involve themselves in other kind of kingdom work. But I definitely think that everything that you do can be done to the glory of God, no matter what it is. And the initial goal, obviously, is to put food on your table and on your family's table and see that they're taken care of. But beyond that, we as believers, I think we're to work for the glory of God and to enrich the lives of others. And that doesn't always mean working 80 hours a week to accomplish a goal. I think that's fine in the short term, but in the long term, I've tried to design a life where I can work and provide for my family on a reasonable amount of time each week, and hopefully enrich the lives of them and others. But work is certainly workaholism is a problem in America. And if you're working just for work's sake or just to make money or all that sort of stuff, I think that's unhealthy and unfulfilling.
Okay, so let's go back to your book. And if you could kind of boil that down for any college listeners at the moment, maybe to 3, 4 tips that you would give those students on even where to start, because it probably seems a bit overwhelming
Yeah, definitely.
to go to college debt free. So, where should they start, or what tips can you offer?
Sure. Well, I think the biggest thing is school selection. If you're coming out of high school, and we'll just talk about undergrad at this point. If you're trying to decide where you're going to go to college, you want to get a 4-year degree. Um, I would say the biggest factor is going to be where you go to school. There's tons of options, and actually in the last 6 months, a whole new world has opened up as Corona has forced us to go to start looking at doing so much remotely. But I would say there is a vast range of what you can pay for a college degree these days. And for a lot of people, I would say to look at community colleges or local colleges. You can attend community college or your local college at a price that's much less than some private schools. And I'm not against private schools, but if you're looking at going to a private school at $50,000 a year versus you can go to your local public college or community college for $5,000 or $10,000 a year, I don't think you're getting 5 to 10 times the value for a private school. And in fact, I know you're not. I did go to Georgetown's a private school, but I went there only because it was actually cheaper for me to go there than it was to go to UK, based on the scholarships and financial aid I got. So anyway, I would say first of all, school choice is extremely important. That's the biggest factor you need to set up, and you can set up a program where you go that allows you to pay for any out of pocket costs yourself. The second one, obviously, big for me is
Sorry, 1 second, Jordan. Do you hear my little
yeah,
Rico the monkey? Hopefully you know him. He always has to make his
I like
his
it.
appearance in the podcast. Matter of fact, he's barking at Matthew because Matthew is getting ready to go to a class. I think he's in his senior year now at UK. So hold on. I'm gonna
Unbelievable.
I'm gonna open my door so Rico can go visit Matthew. Hold on 1 sec. Hold
You're
that
fine.
thought. Okay, I'm back. Thank you so much for your patience, Jordan. Can you recap for us, please?
So number one was school choice. Select a school that you can afford. Um, the second thing I would say is don't be afraid to work during school. Now, at the graduate level, it may be a little bit different, but on the undergraduate level, uh, students can absolutely work while they're in school. In fact, there's a lot of research out there that shows that students who work 15 to 20 hours a week while they're in college actually get higher grades than students who don't work. And I think that's because that has myriad benefits. One is when I was working, I had to stay in college. I had to stay focused. Like I had to set my schedule very intentionally. I knew I had to get my studying done because I had to get to work. And there's honestly so many options. I think people typically think like, oh, what am I supposed to do? Go work at McDonald's and or go serve at a restaurant, which those things are fine, and they're great if that's what's available to you. But there are so many options online. So many flexible paths for our students to work while they're in school. I mean, being a nanny or mowing lawns or all sorts of online business opportunities. Like there's just so many opportunities for college age students to make money these days, and on a really flexible schedule and flexible geography. Like you don't have to take a job where you have to be in one place the entire time. You can, especially now, you can work from wherever.
Yeah, and let me just add also jobs on campus. Those
Yes.
are just so awesome to have. Matthew worked as a tutor at BCTC for, gosh, I think he did it the whole time he was there. And then even when he transferred to UK, he continued working with BCTC. Now he has an engineering internship that he's doing, but so he let the tutoring go. But the tutoring, those jobs on campus are extremely flexible, like you said, and they'll, you got an exam coming up, then you may be able to switch your schedule around. There's a lot of sympathetic rescheduling that can go on there for the class load. So yes, there are many options. Although I will tell you that college officials often they don't say that students should work at the same time. Sometimes they encourage students not to work. And so where do we put that? Is it more individual, like, or is that just some, we just don't have to buy into that lie that students can juggle all of that together. What do you think?
Sure. Well, if those officials making those suggestions are willing to pay the remaining balance of the tuition, then I'm more than welcome to accept that. But that's a little tongue in cheek, obviously. But no, I mean I patently disagree with that line of thinking. I understand on the surface, and you have to remember that those officials, that's their job, is to get students to focus on their studies and to ensure that they graduate. And I respect that train of thinking. But I also think that an education, a college education that's completely well-rounded, happens in and outside of the classroom. And I believe I learned as much in terms of character and how the world works by working while I was in school. And it helped. I 100% believe it helped me learn better in the classroom because I had some real world experience to start applying to the classroom. And I think it's important to have an outlet to take your mind off your studies some, to get out and obviously you can do that with non-work related activities. But I 100% believe that at a reasonable level, working while you're in school is particularly in college is not a negative. I think it's a positive, and I'll be doing everything I can to encourage my kids when they're that age to work while they're in school. And I respect the advice of school counselors and those sorts. And I know I'm sure their intentions are the best, but I'm definitely in the camp that working while you're in school is a net positive on basically every level, and not excessively. It'd be tough to work 60 hours a week and pull down a full-time college schedule, but absolutely 20 hours or so a week. I mean, there's plenty of people who work a full-time job and go to college at the same time. Like, that's not unheard of. And if you're up to it, yourself, what you're capable of handling. But just about everybody, when I was on the college campus, I saw most students wasting way more than 20 hours a week in very non-productive activities, some really non-productive activities. So I don't think that's not what's holding people back in school from succeeding. Working 20 hours a week or so is not holding people back.
Amen. I'm in your camp on this for sure. So, tip number 1 would be school selection, and tip number 2 is don't be afraid to work during school. Go ahead and do it. I totally agree with what you're saying there. And what about, do you have another tip or two?
Well, obviously, scholarships play a big part they played a big part in my paying for school. And I don't have the stat readily available, but I think it's something like 60 something percent of students at the graduate level get some form of scholarship. And it's even higher than that for undergraduates. So you've got to make getting scholarship money or financial aid as high a priority as you can. And by financial aid, I don't mean loans. I mean grants that are, I don't mean money that you have to pay back. I mean grants that are going to basically act as scholarships for you. And those, I don't think most students realize how many sources there are available for scholarships, for help for college. Most schools themselves have scholarships available, but there are all kinds of community organizations. Billions of dollars in scholarship money goes unclaimed every year. And so pursuing scholarships should be job number 1 of high school juniors and seniors, in my opinion. But even once you're in school, there are a whole lot of scholarship opportunities available. And I talk about a lot of them in the book. But that can be a huge boon. If you choose the right school, you combine pursuing all the scholarship opportunities and you're willing to work, those 3 alone there are going to get you a long way toward graduating debt free. Most importantly, though, this isn't really a tip. This is just kind of a mindset, and I've got to do some convincing to get you to buy into this. But if you just decide, the most important factor in graduating school debt free is just to decide from the beginning to not borrow money. That's what I did. Because if you don't make that decision, there are all kinds of forces working to get you into debt for school. The schools themselves, intentionally or unintentionally, your peers, There's all sorts of corporations cropping up these days to help you get low interest loans to go to school. There's all kinds of forces out there that will encourage you to take on student loans. And I just decided at the beginning I wasn't going to do that. And I think it's important for people to make that decision early on. And then once you make that decision, I think the opportunities open up and you see what the possibilities can be. But that's the decision that has to be made ahead of time, because if you wait until after you've applied and got accepted and are going to school, then at that point you're going to school and you're gonna pay for it however it needs to be paid for. But I think plenty of options are available to just say from the beginning, I'm not going to borrow money. I'm gonna pay for school however I have to do it, and then go out there and do it. And there's
Right.
just too many people who have done it to say otherwise at this point.
Right. And this is so helpful, Jordan. I have one question that it just occurred to me. What about credit card debt? So many students get into debt, and it may not be credit card, it may be, they bought a car
Sure.
and they have a car loan. So how do we put those two items into the equation here?
Sure. Well, I think they go hand in hand, and one of the things I talk about in my book, one of the reasons that I encourage students so heavily to avoid student loans, is that student loans, to me, are kind of an entry point. They're almost a gateway to other kinds of debt, because most high schoolers don't borrow money. Most of them don't have credit cards yet. Obviously, most of them don't have home loans or car loans yet. Although some of them do, even at 16 or 17, start borrowing money for cars. But the first money that most adults borrow, is when they're 18 years old, to go to school. And if that's where it ended, then that would be one thing, but that's not where it ends. And credit cards are soon to follow. They're pitched all over the college campuses. So if you're 18, you walk on the college campus, you sign up the first year for $50,000 worth of student loan debt, and you grab yourself a credit card and you start financing your social life on the credit card. Meanwhile, you also finance a car at $10,000 or $20,000. All of a sudden, you manage to graduate at age 22. You walk out with several $100,000 in consumer debt. You've dug yourself a hole that is going to take you minimum of 20 to 30 years to get out of. It's going to steal the best years of your life, because you're going to be devoting that time, those decades, to paying back money rather than using your education to fund your life and live out your dreams the way I think people should. So those things go hand in hand. I see student loans as gateway debt to a lifestyle of bondage, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to encourage students to avoid. Because if you can start the habits today of avoiding debt and saving money, then that's going to have that's really why I'm interested in this. I talk about in the book, your dollar, every dollar that you earn or borrow before the age of 30 is really $100 by the time you're 60. So your actions in your 20s and before uh, have a lot bigger impact than you realize. Because if you could save a dollar or invest a dollar in your 20s, then it's going to magnify over the coming decades. And unfortunately, the same thing's true in reverse. If you've got to pay off $100,000 in your 20s, that's going to end up you're going to end up paying back a whole lot more, and those dollars could have been working to your benefit all those decades, rather than holding you back.
And before we go on, let's take a quick break from our sponsor. Can you speak, Jordan, to our biblical worldview? What is the concept of being a slave in the sense of money and as being a debtor, a
Sure.
person, owes debt? What what is your understanding that how does the Bible speak to that?
Sure. Well, I think it's very clear. Jesus said you can't serve two masters. Either you'll love one and hate the other, or hate one and love the other. And to me, there's no greater definition of being a slave to money than to be in debt. When you've got to make those payments, you've got to make those payments. Your life is not yours, and you are at the mercy of your lender, whoever that may be, whether it's Sally Mae or a private lender, or mom and dad. And that's just a biblical truth. and obviously Proverbs speaks about that as well. And so that doesn't mean that it's sinful to borrow money, in my opinion, or anything like that. I do think it's the Bible speaks very clearly on it. And what Jesus said there, and what the Proverbs has to say, borrower servant to the lender. It rings true, and there's no way to, to find that out quite like borrowing several $100,000 for school. And so I would, I think it's very clear that we as believers need to steward God's resources. All the money we have, our time, talent, treasure is not our own, it's God's, and we need to take very seriously the task of managing it for Him. And I personally believe, based on Scripture and my observations, that the best way to do that, and in particular when in college, is to avoid student loans, to go and get an education that's going to allow you to leave a positive impact on the world, and to not be distracted for decades to come with student loan payments or bound to a certain career because of decisions you made when you were 18, 19 years old. It's really then, and that leads me into, one of my frustrations that I talk about in the book is that we're currently having 18 and 19-year-olds make decisions that are going to affect them for decades. They're making decisions with hundreds of thousands of dollars that your typical 18 or 19-year-old has no ability to understand the size of the decisions they're making. What is the difference between $100,000 and $300,000 to an 18-year-old? Most of them have had no experience, no ability to really calculate that. So that's just yet another reason. Once you've lived a couple of decades and you've been making money for 10 years and spending money, and you understand the value of a dollar, that's one thing. But when I was 18, I had no idea how to value that amount of money, or what it meant to actually sign up to spend that amount of money. And so that's yet another reason why I think we've got to head off this problem in some way.
Okay, Jordan, this is making me think of one question. I know you valued money when you rolled over a whole stack of it with your lawnmower. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, I was actually looking for an opportunity to share that one, just because it's pretty funny and memorable. But this happened and I talk about it in the book. Happened during my second year of law school. Interesting little tidbit is that when I was making my payments directly to the law school, the way it worked is I was like I've outlined, I wasn't borrowing money, but I didn't have to pay my entire semester up front. I think I could pay like half of it up front, and then I had to pay off the balance by the end of the semester. But the school required that if you paid with a credit card, they'd add like a 5% fee or something like that, and they wouldn't accept checks. So I had to pay in cash. So I would go throughout the semester and make these payments in chunks of $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever, with cash. And so anyway, one day, I think it was maybe a Friday, I had it was a Thursday. That's what it was. I was going to make the payment on Friday. I got the money out of the bank on Thursday afternoon, and I had $2,200. I think it was actually $2,222 in my pocket, because that was a Thursday evening, and I was going to go to the school Friday morning and make my payment. And of course, I was that Thursday night, I was out mowing lawns as I normally did. And I think I had been married maybe for a year at that time. My wife was out of town on a business trip, and maybe it was 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening. And I was mowing the lawn. I had the envelope of cash in my pocket because I had left the bank an hour or two earlier. And anyway, as I'm on my mower, mowing this particular yard, I went to back up at one point, and I heard a sound. The mower made a sound. It ran over something, and it sounded like I had run over like a thin phone book or something. It just goes, "Rah." And I was like, oh, that's kind of odd. Uh, and next thing I know, I look over to my right, and where the grass typically comes out of the chute on the mower deck, I saw a different shade of green covering the lawn. And as I looked down there and I saw what was on the lawn, I put my hand in my pocket, and those $2,200 bills were no longer in my pocket. And honestly, it was kind of a surreal moment. I said, like, that didn't just happen. Like, I literally laughed to myself. I was like, that would be funny if that happened, but that didn't really happen. But I turned off the mower and I got down on the grass, and I realized that in fact the $2,200 in cash that had been in my pocket moments ago. I guess it slipped out, and I had just run over all of those bills with my mower, shredded them into a million different pieces. And so honestly, it was, I mean, I hardly even, like, I don't remember even feeling anything. I just remember thinking this is a dream or something. So in my delirium, I picked up all the shredded up cash that was now laying on the lawn, and I drove home. I think I finished the lawn, or maybe that was the last little bit I had. But I picked it all up. I put it in a bag. I had a grocery bag I think I'd found on the truck, and anyway, I drove it out to my parents' house. And by that point, the reality had set in, and I realized that I had run over $2,200 or $2,222. And anyway, I drove out to my parents' house, and I said I didn't know what the protocol was for a situation like this. It hadn't happened to anybody else that I knew, so I didn't really have any experience to go on. But my parents helped me that evening. Actually, that evening and the course of the next morning, I think they worked on piecing every single one of those. I think there were $2,200 bills, and then a 20, and then a couple of ones. They pieced every single one back together, taped them back together. I took them to the bank, and fortunately, the bank had to send the money off to the Secret Service or the Treasury Department, whoever handles deals like this. And a couple weeks later, I did manage to get my money returned to me. They returned full bills to me. But believe it or not, there were hundreds and hundreds of pieces. We recovered every single shred of those bills, other than there was one corner of one $20 bill I think we missed. But yeah, that was calling Meg to let her know that I had shredded up to over 2,000 of our precious dollars at that time. Was not a fun phone call. I think I actually maybe waited till the next day to make the phone call and tell her what had happened. But yeah, that was a pretty bizarre story. It ended up having a happy ending, but it was wow, what a what a time it was.
Yeah, that's such a unique story. I'm sure we've all probably run over things, as we're like I've run over the hose, right? The
Right.
garden hose
Yep,
where you
done
think,
that a
oh,
time or
I
two.
could buy that. And no, I didn't get by it. I have one other question for you, Jordan, as we close out. And I was thinking about the listener who says, this sounds awesome, but I didn't do it that way. And I did get in a lot of debt. And I am 45 and I'm still paying off debt loans, or 55, or, whatever age that might be. So any tips or advice that you might give to that listener at this point?
Sure, absolutely. And I want to be clear that I certainly don't mean to with my book or with my philosophy to shame anybody who's gone down that road. It was honestly because of my parents and other people who talked to me and warned me that I was able to avoid that. So I would say, first of all, if you've been down that road and you're frustrated, one thing you can do is let your kids or others know to avoid that. But second of all, there are obviously plenty of resources out there to help people pay off their debt, their student loans, and otherwise. I mean, Dave Ramsey's organization does a great job with that. His book Total Money Makeover is one I would recommend. But any of their resources are great for paying off debt. I mean, the stories that their organization has produced of people who have paid off consumer debt. Houses, cars, credit cards, student loans are incredible. And it can be done a whole lot faster than I think most people realize once you make a decision. It's kind of like avoiding student loans. You got to make the decision that you're not going to borrow money for school if you want to pay for school debt free. But at the same time, if you got to make the decision, we're not going to borrow any more money, we're going to pay off our debt. And once you make that emotional decision, the possibilities really open up. So I think it's totally doable. You gotta make the decision. We're going to stop borrowing money, and we're going to make the lifestyle changes or sacrifices necessary to pay it off. And the resource I would direct people to is definitely Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover book, and DaveRamsey.com can be real helpful. He and his organization have really inspired me, and they've just got loads and loads of success stories to show how that can be done.
I also love your blog, Jordan, because you're giving a lot of tips there I think the last one that you published was maybe last week or so. And I'm going to put the link in the show notes.
Sure.
And Rico loves this idea, it seems. And I think it was about mortgage
Yep.
and just little simple ways to trim back that. I mean, the rates are so low right now.
Mhm.
So refinancing might be a really good option for some folks, going from the 30 to the 15, those sorts of things, paying just a teeny bit more on the mortgage each month. That would be, I want to make sure that we link folks to your blog. And you, I think, are going to try to regularly post maybe a couple times a month. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's right. You can find my blog at my website, jordanthall.com. And I kind of just, it's kind of all over the place. I try to focus on personal finance and entrepreneurship. So you'll find just kind of random posts about different topics that have to do with personal finance and or entrepreneurship. And I'll be posting there regularly. And you never know what you'll get as far as what topic I'll be talking about. But it's sort of a personal journal and just general stuff that I've learned that I think would be helpful to other people.
I'm just so impressed by Jordan's initiative, his clarity of thought and articulation regarding money and life management. I hope you enjoyed his message as well. Be sure to snag a copy of his book, Every Degree Debt Free. Links are in the show notes. Now let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the bounty of your provisions in our lives. We are such privileged people. Help us to be devoted to you first and foremost, and to consider Jesus Christ as the ultimate and eternal treasure that we can possess here on earth. Teach us what this means and just how to walk all this out with the renewed mind of Christ. In His name, amen. And there you have it, another episode in the books. And until next time, Dios primero y que Dios te bendiga. Ciao.